Hello, friends. We're going to ask you to grab a seat. I know there are still some folks parking, but we have a lot of folks online ready to roll. And we've got a very full agenda today. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you could just find a spot, there are plenty up front or over on the other side as well. Good afternoon. I'm Christy Naus, and I serve as president of the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines. It's my privilege to welcome you to the Community Foundation C3 Center. We're honored to have so many of you here today and even more of you attending virtually. So thank you for making time for this important discussion. And thanks for your interest and commitment to reducing food insecurity in Central Iowa. It's so fitting to announce this community-wide collaborative plan in this location. The 3 C's of the C3 Center stand for connection, collaboration, and community. This space was specifically created for what we're here for today, a hub for nonprofit and charitable giving sectors to come together, convene, and create transformation alongside and in partnership with our governmental partners and business leaders. And today's topic is certainly one critical to our community as we come together to address the issue of rising food insecurity. Before I begin, I'd like to recognize our elected officials joining us in person today. State Senator Isaiah Knox, who may still be parking. Polk County Supervisor Angela Conley. Angela, thank you. Des Moines Mayor Connie Bozen. Connie, welcome. Altoona City Council Member Julie Stewart. Julie, thank you. Indianola School Board Member Sue Wilson. And if there's anyone in person that I missed today, please raise your hand and we'll welcome you as well. All right. And I'd also like to extend my gratitude to Supervisor Robert Brownell and Des Moines Public School Board member Terry Caldwell Johnson, who are joining virtually. If there's anyone else joining virtually, thank you for making time for this today and for your dedication and service to our community. This planning process has very much been done in collaboration with United Way of Central Iowa. We know there's much more to do, and we're grateful to have such a committed partner. I'd now like to introduce Mary Sellers, President of United Way of Central Iowa.
Thank you, Christy, and thanks for hosting this event in such a beautiful new space for our community. And I also want to say thank you for our partnership that extends beyond this plan, but we actually partner on a lot in our community. And so United Way of Central Iowa and the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines, we do have a really important partnership, and I thank you for that. You know, for 107 years, United Way of Central Iowa has been addressing critical issues in our community. It's been both our privilege, but also our responsibility since we were founded at the end of World War I to usher our community through that challenging time and many others since. And food insecurity is no different. In fact, it's an essential element of creating a thriving community. And when the need was identified to design a collaborative and supportive community plan, we knew we needed to be part of the collective discussion and solution. We know through our work in food insecurity that it is just a symptom of a larger systemic issue, poverty. You look at the lack of affordable housing, transportation, lack of access to basic needs. These are all compounding factors for our neighbors in need. And we're at a critical point in our community. We are seeing the highest usage month after month in food pantries across our community. Record-breaking usage month after month. So it's a critical time for our community to come together. In response to this critical need and the desire of many of our food partners, they wanted to find a collaborative path toward a stronger, more coordinated system. So United Way of Central Iowa and the Community Foundation of Greater Des Moines came together to fund the development of a community-centered plan. We were fortunate to have a great pair of facilitators help us through that. Our own Scott Racker with the Robert D. and Billy Ray Center. And then also we had Jordan Vernoy from See What I Mean based out of Cedar Falls. And they really did an exceptional job through the course of the past year facilitating the process. Organizations and people across Central Iowa have a deep concern about their neighbors facing food insecurity and poverty. And it's imperative that our community come together and collaborate to ensure the needs of all neighbors are met in an equitable, dignified, and respectful manner. And that's really been central to this community-wide plan. We must work together to remove barriers for our neighbors in need. We must work together to remove the barriers in the food security system that we have. And as you'll hear in a minute, this plan came together through thoughtful community impact and collaboration, and we're thankful to everyone who has played a role. But we know this is not the finish line. This is just the starting line, and we have a lot of work to do to actually implement the plan. This is bigger than any one organization, any one person. It really is going to take each of us and all of us to roll up our sleeves, to come together, and to address this critical community issue. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Scott Racker, Executive Director of the Robert D. and Billy Ray Center. Scott.
I'd like to thank you, Mary, and I'd like to thank you all for being here today. I also want to acknowledge and thank the 125 people that are online on Zoom right now. And I think that's a testament to our community and what hybrid communication brings to us. And I think that's just exciting. This is an exciting day for our community, for Central Iowa. And while the issue is tough, this is where I believe the excitement is. It's always exciting when our community comes together to go after a challenging issue. And that's the point that we're at today. It was certainly my privilege to be a part of the process of this, along with Jordan Vernoy and SWIM, as you heard, and to see the attendees here today, you and those that are online that we can't see, really reinforces my belief, not a hope, but a belief that our community is ready to turn food insecurity into food security with intentional focus through an identified pathway and accountability. And working with this community on challenging issues over the years, there's one thing I know to be true, and you do as well. Our community comes together to address challenging issues, and we make a difference. And not all communities can have people stand up and say that. Just give you 3 quick examples. When our community had struggled for years with DART and the governance structure to be able to address funding and transit issues, we went after a very difficult issue of what the governance structure of DART would look like, and it was resolved so that then DART could move forward on these other challenging issues. And the fact that that issue was resolved didn't eliminate the other challenges. It just gave us a pathway forward. Or when multiple municipalities came together to find language on a 28E agreement for the Icon water trails, that didn't resolve all of the issues of how do we make this generational impact happen. It gave us a pathway. Quite candidly, I'm one of the people in this room that has been here long enough to remember a community that was struggling with culture and the arts. And a plan came together that resulted in an organization called Bravo that just celebrated again last Saturday in our community. And we're not complete yet with culture and the arts, but we've made a lot of progress. That progress has happened because our community came together. They mapped out a pathway and a plan, and then we get after it. And that's what our community brings to this. So this process has been no different than those other processes. We had a planning committee that was highly engaged. They were very sound in their thinking and very thoughtful in their decisions. These identified goals and strategies that you're going to see in this framework were agreed upon by the planning committee, including participants in public meetings, and confirmed through a broad community survey. I will share with you that in the first meeting of the planning committee, they developed a compact for excellence that guided them in their work. They discussed and agreed to what it would take for us to do our best work and treat each other with care and respect. Elements of their commitment to each other in the process were to be open to and respectful of ideas, people, and the process, to assume the best intentions of each other, to actively listen, to seek to be understood, as well as seeking to understand, to participate, not to hide, but not to dominate, and to stay focused on the goal. And I believe that these same guidelines for engagement can move our community forward to make progress on eliminating food insecurity. With that, I mean, we're at a starting point, and to achieve the goals that are outlined up here, I would encourage all of us to enter this planning implementation with respect for each other and the ideas and the processes that are built into this plan. We need to act with and assume the best intentions on all of the stakeholders to eliminate the food insecurity of our hungry neighbors. We need to listen to each other. We need to seek to understand and to be understood, and we must all participate. We can't hide or dominate within this process as we move forward to accomplish what's in this plan. So the members of the Planning Committee have all committed to the implementation of this plan with specific things that they will be doing. Now is the time, I believe, for the rest of us to put the plan into action with a commitment to sustained engagement and shared accountability by all of our system stakeholders. As Mary said, this is bigger than any one person or organization. I am more than confident that we can achieve great progress when we are committed to doing it together. So in closing, I do want to thank Mary and Christy and the respective boards of their organizations for their continued leadership and commitment in our community to take tough issues and find positive, proactive solutions in a collaborative way. And I do want to thank you for including the Robert D. and Billy Ray Center at Drake University as part of the support in that process. And candidly, for all of you online and for all of you in this room, I want to thank you for being here. And in advance, I want to thank you for being part of the solution, as it will take all of us collectively and our intentional commitment to move this plan forward. And we can do it because we're that type of community. And 20 years from now, we will be the model in the country that people will say, how did that happen in Des Moines, Iowa? And you're all part of the answer to that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the man that's led this effort from the coordination process, Luke Lynch with United Way. Luke, thanks for your leadership.
Thank you, Scott. I'm always ready to run through a brick wall whenever Scott talks, so thank you for sharing your remarks. Good afternoon. I'm Luke Lynch, Senior Community Engagement Officer at United Way of Central Iowa, and I have had the opportunity to work closely in a supportive capacity throughout the planning process. I'm going to share a little bit about that planning process before we get to the goals. But I've worked along with two of my United Way colleagues, Hannah Nelson, who is actually relocated to London. I understand she's joining us virtually, so we have an international audience. That's great. And also my colleague, Jessica Nelson in the back, who is the Community Impact Officer for Essential Needs, Health and Wellbeing, and the co-chair of the Opportunity Food and Security Work Group, which we'll talk about later. So I want to start off by acknowledging the planning committee that Scott mentioned. This group put a lot of time into this process. They put in-person meetings, several half-day retreats, virtual meetings, a lot of time in between the convenings where they were reviewing data and making meaning and identifying trends and bringing it back and really taking it seriously. So I'm going to name the names on here, and if you're here, please raise your hand. Matt Unger, Lynn Wilson, Michelle Book, Jamie Haberl, Dr. Nalo Johnson, Patty Stedden-Kisting, Senator Isaiah Knox, Jessica Nelson, Melissa Stimple, Sue Wilson, and Shannon Dreyer. So thank you. If we could get a round of applause for that group. And this was, of course, facilitated by Scott Racker, who you just heard from, and Jordan Vernoy of See What I Mean. You will see a swim attributed throughout this plan, both in the actual plan and throughout these slides. Know that that stands for See What I Mean. Jordan brings an extensive background in food systems, and so it was a pleasure to work alongside him and see his process in work. So this planning committee was charged with three objectives: to make meaning, to co-create the plan, and to share discoveries. And so I'll dig in a little bit to each of those. To make meaning, an example is that our consultants shared interviews, survey results, data from neighbors, agencies, and food bank pantry leaders. And with the facilitative support, the planning committee then considered the meanings of that, what they were learning. And you're going to hear neighbors throughout when we're referring to our neighbors who are in need, our neighbors who are food insecure. We're talking about our neighbors, and that's really what this is about. They were also charged with co-creating the plan. So in the second phase, when building the plan, the planning committee focused on creating and refining drafts, assisted in stewarding a second round of feedback from key stakeholders, and shared responsibility in developing and sharing a community plan. Finally, to share discoveries, and that's where we are today from here forward, is to share what we've learned, to commit to the plan, to buy in, and to engage others in the community. And that's exactly what they've committed to, and we're so pleased for that. I want to also share that we've had stakeholder engagement throughout the entire process, both neighbors who are food insecure, those who are working direct service, food pantries, and other direct service organizations, and that will continue in order for this plan to be successful. Their voice, the voice of stakeholders, needs to make sure that it's in this plan. So this planning committee at our first retreat was presented with a landscape report, and that included neighbor data, community data, and network data. And so neighbor data is information collected in neighbor surveys about the barriers to access people might currently face. Community data is that's publicly available from sources showing the current state of food insecurity in Central Iowa. And then network data is information about the readiness and willingness of local organizations to address barriers of access for neighbors facing food insecurity. So here's some of the neighbor data. Over 100 neighbors in Polk, Dallas, and Warren counties, and those are the counties that this plan focuses on. Over 100 neighbors were surveyed. And just some key points that I found interesting here: 69% of neighbors learn about services by word of mouth, and that their preferred 36% prefer some other form. So that is to say 69% of people are receiving the support they need or hearing about services through word of mouth. That's not what everybody wants. 62% said it's tough to find an open site when needed, and 72% know of only one or two places to get free groceries. I think Mary referenced this, that it's so interconnected. We can't talk about food insecurity, and we talked about this often in the planning committee, that everything is connected. We can't focus on one issue without focusing on all of them. Food insecurity is a symptom of poverty. So a few other statistics: 57% of neighbors struggle with transportation. 32% of neighbors rely on transportation not owned by their household, and 36% of neighbors report their health as fair or poor in general. As we move to community data, we know that almost 7% of our neighbors in Polk, Dallas, and Warren County are food insecure. That number jumps to almost 9% when we are figuring in children. So children 18 and younger there's almost 9% of children 18 and younger are food insecure. This next stat is, this was a snippet in time. So this plan was put together last fall. The data was collected. So I know Matt will probably share later that this is out of date. But at the time, in August of 2023, DMARC served 24,000 neighbors, 27,000 total pantry visits. So some of those were double. That's an 18% increase from 2022. And I know that in the subsequent months, that number rose. So they hit records every month. And that just is a need that is likely unsustainable. Another area that we identified in the data are the clear disparities. If we look at Polk County, 32.7% of our Black neighbors are food insecure. 18% of Native American neighbors are food insecure. 15.6% of our Latinx neighbors are food insecure, while 7.6% of our white neighbors are food insecure. So there are clear disparities. As we move to the network data, those agencies, those food banks, pantries that are working in the front lines here, we had 40 responses, and 31% of those responses are volunteer-led organizations, while 41% of those organizations have budgets of less than $50,000. Through this survey, we learned a few things: that the network is ready to grow, that our partners are already implementing neighbor-centered practices and are planning to do more, that they need resources and support in order to succeed in adopting neighbor-centered practices, and that they want opportunities to be and to stay connected. I think one really promising outcome of this study is that 90% of respondents to this survey said they're ready to serve more neighbors. That's great. 29%, almost 30% of our network knows of 10 plus other social service organizations. We are very well connected in our community. We'd love for that number to grow. And 66% would like to have more connections, so we're ready to grow. So all of this information was then used in our community engagements and the planning process to understand how we can best support the work. So out of that data, the planning committee was charged with creating headlines. Headlines for what do we see today and what do we want to see in the future. So you'll see here on the screen, and I'll read through them. For neighbor data, what we see from the data, the headline from the data today is that not everyone knows where or how to get the right amount of food. The future, we hope that everyone knows where and how to access services and is able to get the food they want and need. Community, today's data shows us that there are extreme racial disparities across Central Iowa when evaluating poverty. The future, our hope is that intentional reduction strategies successfully lift up marginalized populations to reduce food insecurity and poverty in Central Iowa. And then our network data, today's data tells us that Central Iowa has a network of connected service organizations ready to serve more neighbors, but they need funding and infrastructure support to do so. In the future, it's our hope that Central Iowa service organizations receive the support they need to reduce food insecurity and poverty through providing food as well as wraparound services. So the planning committee put together those headlines, and then we went out to the public. We had a series of 3 community meetings. 2 were in person and 1 was virtual. And we asked these questions that you see up here for every headline. For the current headlines, today headline, we ask, what in your own experience supports this headline? What in your own experience is in opposition to this headline? And what questions do you have about this headline? And then for those future headlines, we ask what excites you, what worries you, and what questions. And so here, and I don't expect folks to be able to read this, but want to show you, we did the Post-it note that you do in all the planning processes, right? Where you walk around the room and do the Post-it notes. And this was just for one headline around neighbors and what we currently see. But community members were then asked to reflect on how the community stakeholders, how they could support the effort to realize the future headlines, and then asked about next steps that they individually or their organizations could take towards these headlines. So from there, after the public input, our facilitator brought back that data, synthesized it, and then shared the themes that they found from the public input. And those were community infrastructure, data collection and analysis, policy and advocacy, access and experience for neighbors, community partnership, collaboration, and accountability. So then it was time for that second planning retreat where we, as a planning committee, gathered together and started to really dig in. Okay, this is the framework. This is what we see. Here are the themes. Let's set some goals. We started to work through setting goals. And then when we were okay with that, we started to look at tactics and then the measurements that we could hold ourselves accountable. So after that, the facilitator synthesized that organization, sent it out to the planning committee and said, hey, is this right? Did we hear this right? Planning committee said yes. And then it went a second survey out to the broader community and we received over 200 responses. I know many of you in this room responded to that, so thank you for that. And we were really, really pleased to share that 92.3% of the community said, yep, that's what we heard. That's right. This framework and these goals that you're about to hear, that's spot on. That's exactly what we said in these public input sessions and through the data. And I should also note, there was a good number of people with lived experience, of neighbors with lived experience who took that survey. So this is the strategic framework that we arrived at. Our shared strategic vision is a strong, collaborative, connected community that listens to our neighbors and takes action to address the root causes of food insecurity. With a community-wide commitment that we are committed to fostering a united and resilient community, harnessing our collective voice and resources to champion policies and initiatives that tackle the underlying issues of food insecurity. We aim to amplify the narratives of individuals facing food insecurity in Central Iowa and to create an empowering and equitable experience for our neighbors seeking assistance. So this is broad enough that everybody can see themselves in this. Hopefully every individual organization can see themselves and see a place where they can add to this plan and these goals that you're about to see. So you'll also see these goals throughout, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But the first goal is to offer a welcoming and dignified experience for neighbors in need of food and services through an accessible and connected network of providers in Central Iowa. And the tactics that will get us there, I'll just read the tactics, but please do dive into the relevant measures of success later. So the tactics are to gain a commitment from the community organizations to listen and meaningfully engage with neighbors when shaping decisions that affect the way they access services, to improve and invest in making service navigation easier for neighbors, particularly for minoritized, immigrant, and refugee communities, and to collaborate and communicate across the community to make services more well-known for neighbors. Our second goal is to develop, advocate, and implement policy solutions that are informed by data and voices of people with lived experience to improve the quality of life for neighbors facing food insecurity. The tactics involved here are to advocate for policies at all levels, neighborhood, city, county, state, and federal, that address the root causes of food insecurity, to take multifaceted approach to sharing the story of food insecurity and poverty in Central Iowa, and to foster partnerships to inform policy solutions that are neighbor-informed and outcome-driven. Our third goal is to tell the story of food insecurity in Central Iowa through an intentional, collaborative, and equitable data collection process to better inform service design and decision-making. Tactics include understand the community context by developing a shared data collection plan that is accessible and approachable to all community organizations and individuals, consistently listen and learn from neighbors to direct our collective efforts, and to measure and report progress towards shared success metrics with all stakeholders. And our final goal is to grow stronger together by honoring our neighbors lived experience, and building collaborative and connected community. So those tactics include all partners are committed to sharing accountability and supporting the network in addressing root cause of food insecurity. Network members will work together to develop meaningful partnerships that remove barriers and improve access for neighbors. And then finally, to amplify the voices of neighbors and share our collective efforts as a unified message that addresses the root causes of poverty and inspires action toward food security in Central Iowa. So I know that was a lot, and I thought it was important. We thought it was important to work through the process. How do we get here? What was the commitment? What was the engagement with the community? And these are the goals that were arrived at. And we had unanimous consent with the planning committee and commitment. And again, that 92.3% from the community that said, yep, that's what we heard. So with that, I'm excited to welcome members of the planning committee, a few members of the planning committee up to a panel discussion. They'll share some of their reflections on the process and how they'll be committed going forward. So I'll introduce Angie Detlis-Stretton, the Chief Community Impact Officer of the Community Foundation, who has graciously agreed to facilitate the panel.
Great, thank you so much. Making sure that the mic is working. I'm going to invite my colleagues to come up here. And if you want to slide the chairs up a little bit so you're not feeling so pushed against the wall, you are welcome to do that. It's always fun to get situated in front of a room full of people, isn't it? That's just always the best. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Luke. And more importantly, I just want to say thank you to the panel members who are also members, rather, of the planning committee. So just want to recognize that. And I'm sorry, we're trying to stay within this area so that our virtual guests can also see. So I apologize if I'm standing in front of you, but want to sort of do the dual role here as we work through the conversation today. So again, thank you so much. This was certainly a very heavy lift for many members of our community, and just want to recognize all the work of the four of you and certainly the rest who served alongside of you. As you know, our community has faced challenges in recent years related to our food system. We face challenges in terms of our network, and we have faced challenges in terms of increasing need. And the affirmation that all of you have made and that you heard Luke articulate toward this collaborative plan is an incredible step forward for the benefit of our neighbors. I'm grateful, certainly grateful, for all the time that all four of you have put in, and for joining me as part of this conversation. Wanted to just do a quick introduction for everyone who doesn't know who's joining me today. So we've got Dr. Nalo Johnson, who serves as the president and CEO of the Mid-Iowa Health Foundation. Patty Snedding-Kisting, who is the executive director of the Urbandale Food Pantry, and who also serves as one of the co-chairs for the Opportunities Food Insecurity Network Work Group. I think I got all of those correct. All right, I will take it. Matt Unger, who's the CEO of the Des Moines Area Religious Council. We will reference as DMARC moving forward, and most of you know him as DMARC. And then Michelle Book, who serves as the president and CEO of the Food Bank of Iowa. So again, thank you so much. And we're gonna dive in. We got a lot of questions, and you all warned me that I might not give you enough time, so I'm gonna try and stick to mine as well. So Luke provided a lot of content, a lot of background on the process itself, the level of involvement, the depth of information. And I want to start with a couple of questions about that planning process. Specifically, we'll get some of your feedback on what that process was like and what it means. And then we'll move into some more questions related to those goals and the shared accountability that we were referencing. So we'll just start right away. And I want to begin maybe, Nalo, from your perspective, and you are definitely a data person. I know that about you and your background and the work that you're leading, but want to understand a little bit from your perspective, how important was that process, that intentional process, to the creation of this plan? And maybe for folks in the room, how confident can the community be about that groundwork that has been done? So what would you say to that?
Great first question. I think what I really appreciated about this process was that it was a data-driven process, and that we were looking not only from that kind of quantitative standpoint to develop what that picture of food insecurity and poverty looked like in our Central Iowa region. So reviewing all of those usage statistics, as well as our census data, so on and so forth. but really from the qualitative standpoint as well, that doing that engagement with organizations that are serving our targeted populations, doing the engagement by surveying those who have the lived experience of needing to access these resources really meant we were able to identify not just through those hardcore statistics, but also hear the story and bring to life what those statistics meant as well. So in my opinion, we were really gathering this whole picture of what food insecurity looked like and the experience of poverty within our community.
Well, and I love how you reflected on the qualitative in addition to the quantitative. And, you know, in particular, Matt, I'm curious from your standpoint with DMARC's work, you know, we know that both of those things are really important. And one of the goals that was highlighted is really to tell the story of food insecurity in Central Iowa through intentional, collaborative, and equitable data collection process. That sounds like a big feat, right? It sounds like a big feat. But we want to do that, all three of those things, because we want to better inform design and decision-making. So we know the why we would do it. Data has been really important to all of you, and it's especially been important, I know, to DMARC in your work. So how do you see that goal being activated? How will that help everybody collectively if we actually get to that point of data collection?
Well, I think it has to be done with care. You know, we can't just willy-nilly go out there and start collecting data. And I think that's what we aim to do with the way we collect data at DMARC. But it has to be done, because absent having the information and the data that you can point back to, the vacuum will fill with the rumors and the stereotypes, and you need the information to combat those rumors and stereotypes. So it's really important that we find a way to at least start doing that and getting beyond, you know, just specifically in the heart of the metro. Because unfortunately, one of the things I hear most frequently is, well, yeah, but that's just what's happening in Des Moines. And actually, it's usually worse outside of Des Moines because there's less resources, things are fewer and farther between, and there's a lot more barriers that people face. So it's a matter of, everybody doesn't have to start doing data at the level that DMARC is doing data, but we have to start somewhere and start collecting some things that can help inform what's happening out there, so that when people say it's just a bunch of unemployed people, you can say, no, it's not actually. Look at this number of people that are working 1, 2, 3 jobs. But without that data, it's really hard to make those arguments.
Well, and I think that's an interesting one. You shared with me some data and information, and I believe I'm recalling this correctly. It's between 80 and 85% of individuals who find support through a particular pantry within the DMARC network who are employed.
It's about 40% are employed. When we look across our whole network, it's 37% are kids. So let's take that chunk out. Another 10 to 12% are seniors. So let's take that chunk out, and then you add in the
got it. And then we've got the others in there.
Percent of who's getting assistance in our food.
Yeah. Okay, so let's recap that one more time, just because I want to make sure I'm catching it correctly. So about 37% are youth.
Correct.
Okay, and then we've got about 12% or so seniors.
Correct.
And then we've got, what'd you say, about 40% working or receiving some other?
Yeah, it's between 37 and 40%. Okay. We usually see 15 to 20% of folks that are coming through the network that are currently unemployed.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about, you know, the perspective, Patty, that you have, being, I'm going to say on the ground, even though I know everybody's involved at different levels on the ground. But Patty, you know what this data looks like in real life terms, right? You and your colleagues, I know, are in the front lines of the pantry, stacking the shelves and helping provide services, meeting people when they show up. You know, we talk about this as a community plan, and Scott teed it up for us, and Mary and Christy did as well. But the idea that it will take nonprofits, business, we've got government advocates and officials here to help support other partners, that it's going to take everybody to activate this work. I'm curious from your standpoint, what will that mean in the walls of your pantry?
That's a great question. I would say, as I reflect back on the past 2 years, and more specifically this last year, and the sheer growth and the increase in need and the broken records that have been broken every single month, it's astounding that, you know, our pantry and other pantries have been able to keep up with this need that we're seeing, and our ability to navigate that growth and that increase I would say has been challenging at best. It has been demanding and it's been hard. And to kind of put that in just a very quick perspective, pre-pandemic, we would welcome an average of 1,200 families to the pantry per month. And now we're welcoming over 1,800 families to the pantry per month. In November, we shattered an all-time record of over 2,100 families that visited our pantry in that month. And again, like our ability to continue with this growth is hard. And so to have everybody in the community between, you know, the community and government and corporations really, you know, agree and commit to this work that we're doing. I can speak for myself, and most pantries, we rely on all of our partners to be able to give in the capacity that we do. So when all of our partners are working together in a collaborative effort and that ecosystem is all kind of clogs to that wheel, I think that we can then start to see reduction in food insecurity and remove barriers for families to access services.
Well, and you mentioned ecosystem, and I use that sort of context a lot when we're talking about issues. I mean, they're rarely, in fact, I can't think of an example of a community issue that or a challenge that doesn't operate within an ecosystem. And, you know, Michelle, I want to, get some of your reflections here too, because I know you representing the Food Bank of Iowa, a key player in that ecosystem. So, you know, the comments about underscoring the network and the champions and people really coming together, there's that fourth goal. And I just want to read it. You'll all get a copy, as you're leaving here today. But that fourth goal says, grow stronger together by honoring our neighbors' lived experience and building a collaborative and connected community. Well, that kind of to me describes an ecosystem, and I know all of you recognize that. So can you speak to that concept of shared accountability and the commitment in Central Iowa to achieve this plan and most importantly, to achieve it together?
Well, it started with the leadership of Scott and Luke with the support of Jordan Vinoy, and thank you to Mary and Christy, because this would not have been possible without that leadership. And they charted a course for us that led us down a path that was very collaborative and productive experience. And I think through that, all of us came to understand and appreciate the needs of our neighbors. We had many conversations about that. And we also had a great understanding of some really amazing work being done today. But undoubtedly, we realized in those conversations that we're better together. Not stealing a United Way phrase, but we are better together. And that includes food providers like me and Matt, and then the food distributors like Patty and the others in the network. None of us can be successful by ourselves. Food Bank of Iowa finds the food and delivers it, but the hardest work is taking that food the last few miles to hand it to the people that are in need of assistance. And you look them in the eye when you hand them the food or you serve them a meal, and you know how desperately they need that assistance. So it's people really on the front line that have the hardest job. Commitment is critical. And Central Iowans deserve that we have that commitment to collaboration. Collaboration is critical.
Well, and I think too, one of the things that I understand in that process that you kind of wrestled with is the role of collaboration and the role of coordination and what that kind of looks like when you're talking about within an ecosystem and the number and the increases of folks who are seeking services across that really whole spectrum of ways that they're providing or finding support. Nalo, you and I had a conversation, sorry if we can pass this back down here. Nalo, you and I had a conversation about sort of a unique element that shows up in this plan, or at least I think some folks in the room would find this a unique element. And that is that one of the key tactics is about addressing root causes of food insecurity. So some of you might have come in here today thinking that we're going to talk about pounds of food and we're going to talk about, individual numbers of folks served, and that is critically important. But I think the unique thing about this plan is really the call out and the invitation in to start talking about advocacy or work around food insecurity root causes. So, tell me more about what an intentional focus like that could mean to the collective work.
I think one of the things that I was most proud of in this process was our identification that this wasn't just about food insecurity, but truly the driver of food insecurity, which is poverty. And that there's nothing that we could do in this plan to truly meet the need in our community if we aren't addressing the root cause of what's causing that food insecurity in the first place. So, and I think it was really important that we had the people who are serving folks, both on the distribution end, as well as being able to obtain all of that food that's needed in our community, come to that conclusion and support this effort as well, to saying what we're really talking about is poverty. So I'm very proud, and as someone who represents an organization that is not a service provider in those ways, but has different resources to bring to the table, to say, I can connect to this plan as well, and particularly see that through goal number 2, and saying we need to think about different poverty reduction strategies so that there will be a decreased need to actually access the resources that are provided. And I think we have some specific examples, and a lot of those partners are in the room as well when we think about what we're trying to support with Uplift, the basic income pilot. I think that's a tangible example of what goal number 2 is speaking to, in terms of being able to come forward with different solutions to address the root cause issue of poverty.
Well, and these circumstances are evolving, and Patty, you just shared the numbers went from 1,200 pre-pandemic to over 1,800 post-pandemic. And I'm sure that that continues to be a challenge for those that you're serving, and the numbers that are coming in. Matt, I know recently you'd say there's about 2,000 first-time visitors every month through DMARC networks. This caught me for a moment, so I'm going to share it. You double check my numbers here, please, as I know you will. So I had down that over 65,000 unique people, not duplicated, unique people, in 2023 alone visited a DMARC pantry.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I know this is good. This is like a little game. Okay, now I want to put it in context though, because I think some people hear numbers and we just think, okay, yeah, that's a number, it's a big number, but what does it mean? So that is basically saying just shy of 1 in 4 Des Moines residents have used one of the 14 DMARC pantries.
Correct. Just the 14 DMARC pantries.
Yeah. So that was going to be my second or my third point.
Tens of thousands on top of that.
Yeah. So, when we talk about this evolving situation that we're facing as a community, it is real. It is real families. I mean, if you look around this room here, you look at however many folks are joining us online, if it's 1 in 4, it puts a different type of face, a different type of perspective. It brings sort of that qualitative data approach like you were talking about, Nalo, and why it's so important that we think about the ecosystem, we think about how we're addressing our neighbors, we think about how we're reducing barriers, because it's more and more of our neighbors, right? So I'm curious, from your perspective, Matt, like this plan, if it's implemented, when it's implemented, right? We'll say it that way. What does it mean for the network? What hope might we have about what it could do to numbers that seem to be going the wrong direction?
Well, I think where the hope is in the advocacy piece of this. I say this all the time, and it's probably the worst kept secret in food insecurity, but the answer to food insecurity isn't giving people food. It's solving the reasons they need it. And if we can get closer to doing that, and if we can get data that shows the kinds of things that, Nalo just brought up a really cool pilot that's happening here in town that our state legislature is trying to ban from ever happening again. To be able to have those of us that are fighting this issue go and talk to legislators and say, you've got to stop doing this. We cannot solve this problem just through charitable response, just through government programs, just through corporate giving. We all have to do a different piece of this. And I think this plan gives us sort of the structure under which we can all find our niche that we can each make an impact in and really start getting at some of those root causes. And I think that's what's exciting about it. And that's where the hope lies in this plan.
Well, and I want to give Michelle an opportunity too to answer the question. I know data is really important, and you're certainly seeing the need and the growth. You described, sort of the function of the food bank helping to get to the folks on the ground, like the Patties of the world, who are looking the families in the face. I mean, I know, Patty, I'm just using it illustratively, but really working with the families and walking them through those experiences. So, from your vantage point, Michelle, what does implementation of this collaborative plan mean for Central Iowa? What will it mean when we see it implemented?
I'm sure every person in the room and those that are attending virtually, my fellow planning committee partners, everyone here agrees resources are limited. Resources are precious. And excuse the metaphor, but we can't throw spaghetti at the wall and hope that it sticks. Every single dollar has to be invested to ensure we get the greatest return on investment in this fight against food insecurity and the biggest, most impactful benefit to our neighbors that are in need. And I really believe that data will help us get there, that data will help us understand real need in real time, that data will help us shift our services accordingly, and that through data, we're going to realize where we have gaps and where we have overlaps. And then it becomes a circle back around again. We see gaps, we see overlaps. How do we redeploy resources in order to do the most good for our hungry Central Iowans? You're really good at data. DMARC is really, really good at data, but Matt knows how hard it is to do that. It's not a simple turnkey operation. You dedicate a lot of resources to that. If we can figure out data, and if we can understand real need, if we can shift services quickly, if we can be nimble, if we can eliminate overlaps, fill the gaps, we will improve the lives for Central Iowans. We will improve food insecurity in Central Iowa. And what's good for Central Iowa is good for all of us.
Well, and I apologize, I can't remember who exactly. I think maybe Matt, you had mentioned it, and I know Patty, you and I have talked about this. You can't really buy food your way out of this situation that we found our community in, right? And Michelle, you mentioned a comment about like it takes resources and sort of thinking strategically about those resources. And I think in the philanthropic space, working for a foundation and working with donors, there's this assumption a lot that philanthropy will fill this gap. That's not what's going to happen, because that's not exactly the intention of philanthropy, right? There's a role for philanthropy, but there's a role for all other types of institutions and organizations. And I think I go back to the resources that all of you are getting and needing. They're needing some too, but just even the power around the purchasing power that's brought, and making sure that we're leveraging where we can the best use of philanthropic dollars in a way that's going to provide more food in the meantime while we're working on these other issues. So really thinking about it in this holistic sense about how are we all working together to leverage our resources to the benefit of the whole ecosystem, I think is a key part of this plan too. So Patty, you apparently are my what does it mean on the ground person for today's conversation, but I'm going to come back there because I think it's really important. It's easy to get lost in what the system seems, but the system exists to support. And one of the first goal is about a welcoming and dignified experience for neighbors in need of food and services through an accessible and a connected network of providers, right? That's a big mouthful, but it's just saying a dignified experience in a way that makes sense with partners that make sense. So if that's working, what does it mean for the family that you served yesterday afternoon before you left?
How much time do I have to talk?
Well, I'm going to get the note here in a little bit. You got a couple minutes.
Okay, well, this one is incredibly important to me. And I really think that it's a multi-factor approach, right? From the community and government and corporation perspective. To me, it's shifting a narrative onto who and why people need access to food. And I always like to throw out this simple statistic, and it's just food for thought. When I do talk in the community, yes, pun intended, food for thought.
I was going to say something.
I know. Luke will appreciate it. But that in an entire year, an individual only visits the Urbandale Food Pantry 3 times a year. That is not excessive. That is not every month. That is something happened in my life that I need some additional support. It is a job loss. It is a medical bill. It is my children are home for the summer and they are going to eat me out of house and home. There are a variety of reasons that bring families to our door. And when we can shift that perspective and shift that narrative, it allows room for more collaborations from the community. It allows room for more support. It allows room to breed champions inside our communities and inside our corporations that are willing to fight the causes and conditions of poverty and what we are all collectively trying to do. The second kind of approach and factor to that, I think, is from us as leaders and leaders in the community. Do we foster an environment within our own organizations that allow our staff and our volunteers to provide those services with dignity and compassion? And do we bring them to the table in the decision-making process? Are their voices heard? And I think when individuals feel valued in their organizations, they are more likely to extend that same respect and compassion in the services that they're providing, which directly impact the families that we serve. And I think lastly, through this process, one of the things that we've talked about and kind of we've all honed in on from the very beginning is that we're not going to buy food our way out of this problem. So how can we support families and meet them where they're at? We know that families are going to food pantries. So how can we support them in the current structures that are in place and integrate additional services or route other services in those organizations as more of a community support hub? You know, I think of the work that we're doing right now, my pantry kind of specifically, I know my staff would welcome the opportunity to be able to have a conversation and to just listen for a few more minutes with the families that are coming in. But so often we and other pantries are just trying to survive the current day. Yesterday, we served 156 families. We're open 9 hours a day. I have one person doing intake. If you do the math, that's less than 4 minutes per family. There's no time in those 4 minutes to say, hey, what else is going on in your life? Hey, do you know that you're probably approved for this service? Hey, do you know that this new program just started and you would qualify for it? So to answer your question,
Yeah.
I think that what this would mean is a decrease in the hoops and the barriers that we oftentimes ask families to jump through to receive services. If we can create this support and collaborative effort to really meet families where they're at and to take that intentional approach, I think it would reduce the stress that families go through on a daily basis to meet their basic needs. And I think it would give them more opportunities to understand the support that is available to them. And it's not just I was in the right place at the right time and talked to the right person who told me about this thing.
Yeah.
Because that happens all the time.
Well, and the value of the ecosystem and the well-networked system. And certainly there's a lot of work to do. But I want to talk about, you know, maybe the biggest question is, so how are we going to do this? Scott reiterated at the beginning, I know it's like, pass the mic. I know, we'll wait up. I know. So Scott reiterated at the beginning of the afternoon today that the focus is not only in the adoption of this plan, but the commitment to shared accountability. Nothing would be easier than taking this, setting it on the shelf, doing as we've done, moving forward in the same exact way. And it's also, if we did that, it would be the last thing that our neighbors need and far from what has been committed to. So I also know, though, that bringing this to life is going to take far more than the 4 of you and the other partners that sat around that planning table. It's going to take all different sectors within our community to really step up, lean in, to work with diligence and really strengthen that authentic ecosystem. I want to wrap up by asking what I think are 3 simple questions, but I know they are not simple. All right, we're starting with NALO. So I prepped them on this, but I felt like, it's really important, and I asked them to think about it both from their individual perspective, but I think even more importantly from the perspective of their organizations. So I'm going to say them out loud, and then we'll start with NALO, and we're going to, okay. Why are you and your organization committed to this collaborative plan? How are you committed? And what is your hope? So let's first start with, why are you and your organization committed? And we're gonna pass the mic, and then we'll start with number 2, okay? Okay, so why are you and your organization committed to this collective plan?
So as a philanthropic organization, we're committed to addressing the social determinants of health and investing in system change initiatives, which mean root cause strategies to address community needs. So we're committed to this plan because we understand that the economic health and well-being of the community is essential in ensuring that we have a thriving Central Iowa community. In terms of how we're connected to this plan.
You can wait. I was gonna make everybody answer the first one. Yeah, let's do the first one. We're just gonna, okay, so you take this one first. Let's go, all right. I'm gonna throw a little curveball. I wanna end on the hopes, okay? I wanna end on the hopes of everybody. So Patty, why are you and your organization committed to this plan? Sorry, that was audible.
Because the current model is not working. Because we have to take a different approach. I can tell you, as the director of my food pantry, we are not going to be able to continue to give, with the current model that we have. And we're looking at a variety of different things to be able to support the current need, but it's going to take an innovative, different approach than what we're currently doing, because the need is going to continue to grow until people from all of the ecosystem, from every aspect, really have a buy-in in helping what we're doing, and to look at those root causes and how do we make changes, and looking at all of the different kind of factors, I would say.
Thank you. Matt?
So, I mean, this is who we are as DMARC and who we've been for 70 years. And I think why we're committed to this is because over 65,000 people deserve better. And if we aren't doing something different, we're not going to get a different result. And we have to get different results. I keep bringing this number up. These numbers are bonkers. If we're not looking at this as a crisis or an emergency, we're not viewing it the right way. You should be appalled that many people came to 14 pantries. It's crazy. So that's our why.
Thank you. Michelle?
Whew, that's a lot of stuff. This plan aligns with our mission and vision at Food Bank of Iowa as we work to build stronger communities while alleviating food insecurity across the state. Food Bank of Iowa is built on collaboration. That's the foundation of the food bank. We work with and provide food to 700 organizations across the state of Iowa, 200 of which are right here in the metro, and most of the DMARC pantries get supplies from both DMARC and Food Bank of Iowa. The more effective we can be together, the better for all of Iowa, certainly the better for Central Iowans. And I really see that this can re-energize and reinvigorate the opportunity work that Luke Lynch leads here at United Way.
Well, let's pass the mic. We'll start back here and then come this way. So Michelle, I'm going to start with you on this one as we move the mic back down in a sec. So we talked about systems change to root cause as part of the why. Have to have a different approach, part of the why. It's who we are and people deserve better. It's part of the why. And it aligns to a core value of collaboration as part of the why. So I want to push a little bit further and ask the question, how? How are you committed to the plan? And I know this is a long-term plan, but I'd just like to share with folks in the room, like, how will that show up for you and your organization?
We are committed. I'm committed to open communication, to greater collaboration, to ensure that every Central Iowan facing food insecurity has access to adequate nutrition. And they also have the knowledge as to where they may go to get the support that they need. We will meet regularly. We will keep open dialogue and we'll solve problems together.
Thank you.
Yes, so.
Matt's up. Thank you.
I think for us, the first piece is keep learning. We have to continue to learn about what are the gaps that we're missing, what are the other opportunities out there, who are the other collaborators that aren't at the table that need to be at the table, what are we hearing from those in need that we haven't acted on and need to act on. So continued learning, but also DMARC has done and been working on in the areas of a lot of these goals, and I think we can also teach. And there's things we can help others to learn that we've learned how to do and we've had some success doing. And it doesn't have to be at the DMARC level right away, but if you're doing this work and you're not doing advocacy in some way, nothing's going to change. If you're doing this work and you haven't found a way to involve the voice of the person facing food insecurity, you got to find that way because you have to have that voice at the table. And we've had some success in doing those things. And so to the extent we can share what's worked for us and see if that works for others, you know, I think that's a big piece of what we can bring to the table too.
Thank you. Patty, other things to build on here?
I would say, you know, for us, it is continuing to work in that collaborative space. I'm very much a share the love. If I have too much of something, I'm gonna give it away. Making sure that resources are available across the board, reaching out to other pantries to say, hey, what's going on? What are you doing? Do you need support? This is a resource, this grant is available, any of those things, I think on the ground level is really important because it does foster that environment for collaboration and connection and for pantries that are on the ground, you know, doing that work to feel supported within each other. And then I also think, you know, how we're gonna do this is, you know, taking an innovative approach on what are new and design thinking ways that we can try something different. So collaborating with Project Iowa on a model that might be able to support some of our families, to working with DMARC more, you know, intentionally on how to support families more, continuing to work with Food Bank and making sure that all of our partners in that advocacy role of talking with corporations and every, you know, Rotary Club that I can go to and breakfast or chamber, and just really making sure that individuals in our community understand that it really takes the collective community for us to be able to activate this plan.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Nalo?
So I'm really interested in being able to maximize the potential of philanthropy to help address community needs. And I think, you know, I believe strongly in that community wealth model, which is your public, your private, your philanthropic, and your nonprofit partnership, because everyone has a different resource or expertise to bring to the table. So I think being able to activate that model in innovative ways to support different types of solutions coming forward, to me, is the way in which I think we can show up in the most meaningful way to support this plan.
So you saw, or you heard some hows here, thinking through new philanthropic models, really challenging organizationally to reach out to new partners, to consider new ways to leverage resources, sharing resources across, making sure that we can leverage each other's assets where we have them. I loved the reflection on keep learning. What can we teach and share? I heard Michelle commenting on the data, and I know we've used different data differently across system. And I think that's an interesting concept that is not lost in the importance in this plan. I love the meeting regularly, open dialogue. I also loved the inclusion, Michelle, and referencing the nutrition, really looking at adequate nutrition for folks seeking food. I think, you know, these are some things that are certainly not end alls to these goals, but I think are some things that are going to be really critical to moving it forward. So my last formal question, what is your hope? I'm just going to I'm just going to leave that one. What is your hope?
I'd say one of my hopes
Mhm.
is that decision makers recognize that innovation is needed and that it's important to let the data drive where those decisions are so that we can truly have the kind of impact that we want to see in addressing community needs.
I concur. And I would also say my hope is, I didn't read the last part of this email, so.
It's okay. That was it. What is your hope?
My hope. I would say, I see a future where families don't have to feel ashamed to receive services, that they're not required to jump through hoop after hoop after hoop to potentially receive some support that would maybe last them a month, or have to go to 5 different organizations to receive enough support to make 1 month's rent, or to, I see a future where there is dignity and you don't have to feel ashamed to come and say, hey, something happened in my life and I need support. And poverty, it doesn't discriminate, and it is in every community. There is next door neighbors, there is the kid in your child's class, it is the senior that you see at the grocery store. Somebody has faced food insecurity in their lives or are currently facing it. And so my hope is that we decrease that stigma and we find a model that supports families and neighbors where they are currently at, without expectations of what they should have to do to receive that support.
Thank you. Matt, what's your hope?
So my hope would be that in 5-10 years, there's a different panel of people up here discussing a different issue, because this community has done what it's done so many times before and really come together and eliminated barriers to people getting access to food, maybe found better ways to provide the additional pieces of assistance they need in those venues as well. Government came together, the for-profit world came together, and the nonprofit world came together to where we have food insecurity at a sustainable level, and we're on to the next thing.
Thank you. Michelle, what's your hope?
Amen. Our vision is a hunger-free Iowa. My hope is in the future, there is a future where no Iowan goes to bed hungry, where no child goes to school or starts a summer day on an empty stomach, where no senior citizen chooses or has to choose between food, medicine, or keeping their heat on. I hope we see a community and a state where everyone has enough. And some days that feels like a pretty big stretch. So I really hope that each one of us has the generosity of spirit and the positivity in their heart to support everyone engaged in this effort, keeping our neighbors in Central Iowa who are struggling to make ends meet, keeping them top and center of this conversation.
Certainly reflective in the goals of the plan to really be neighbor-centered. And so just to kind of recap here as I work to transition it off to Luke to wrap us up. So you heard a little bit more about individual as well as organizational commitments and their hopes. And I certainly appreciate the strategy around innovation, making sure that we remove sort of this any sense of being ashamed or not feeling free to ask for help. Really just leaning into no one's going to be hungry. I mean, I think that's something we all would align with. And I like the idea of a different panel, different people, different conversation, right? I think that's really important. But I also think that it's really going to include all of us in working on this in the months ahead. Please support them in this work. Please support the colleagues who aren't up here. So it's great to affirm the goals. The action plan's coming. and they need you behind them to do this work. And hold them accountable. Hold all of us accountable. To have these hopes happen, same stuff isn't going to get same results. And I think we can all agree to that thing in this room, certainly today. So remember, it's about the ecosystem, working together to remove those barriers, build that accessible network. The second one, gotta advocate for policy change. And it has to be change that our neighbors have told us is needed. We have to use data across the network. And it has to be used to impact design and decision-making at the organizational level and at the system level. And just wrapped up here at the end, we have to honor that lived experience of all people, and it has to be authentic collaboration. It has to be true, it has to be authentic to these goals. So I hope you will join me in this work. I hope you will join them in this work and all of the others who've been involved. After all, I certainly think that our neighbors deserve it, and it's certainly time that it's done. So with that, thank you so much for being a part of this today. Thank you for being committed to the ecosystem. Thank you for being committed to a new way of working together. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Luke to wrap us up.
Well, thank you again to the panel. That was great. And thank you for sharing your commitment and process and what that meant to you. So what's next? That was the easy part, the plan. Now we've got to implement it. What does that look like? We've heard firsthand from some hunger fighters, some leaders of organizations, but I think we've heard also that it doesn't take you to be a leader of an organization like that to be a part of this plan. There's a piece of it for everybody. And to use an analogy that Jordan Vernoy from Swim used, is that this is a marathon, and I've run one marathon and will not run another one, but this is a different kind of marathon where we are at the starting line. We've all got here in different ways. We've trained different, and we have different ideas of how it's going to go. Maybe we're going to hit the wall if you didn't train as much as you should have. But the goal and the idea is that we're all moving towards that finish line. So that's important to keep in mind, that there's a place for everybody here, and it might look different for everybody, but there's a place for everybody to see themselves. So this is designed to live through the Opportunity Food Insecurity Work Group. Opportunity is a collective impact initiative of United Way of Central Iowa, and we have 4 active work groups at present with several subgroups as well. We meet regularly around food insecurity, housing and homelessness, transportation, and reentry. The idea that we've heard over and over again is you can't focus on one without focusing on the other. So we've got these work groups that work separate, but then come together and share what they're learning so that we can address it all as one. Because there's not one simple solution. So I do want to acknowledge my colleague Hannah McDowell, who is back here in the kitchen. She's very active. There she is. Thank you, Hannah. She's very active and a part of facilitating the opportunity work groups. So we meet every third Wednesday at 9 o'clock. So the next meeting is February 21st at 9 a.m. And we would invite you all to be a part of that and to join it. But before we talk more about that, just want to acknowledge the shared accountability model that we've talked about. So the shared accountability model emphasizes interdependence, transformative actions, and mutual support, and is recommended to keep moving forward for this work. The model encourages regular convenings, fostering trust and collaboration among diverse stakeholders committed to the plan. So on the screen, you'll see this QR code, and they're on the goals around here as well. Would encourage you, when you have a chance, to scan that, and if you're on your phone, you'll see that you can download the plan from there. But then down at the bottom, you can indicate, hey, I want to get involved in hopefully all of these goals. But if there's one that really piques your interest, select that one. And that's how we'll begin to organize as we move forward with this work group to move towards goals. Also, for those of you online, you can use that. But as we wrap up here in a little bit, for those of you here in person, planning committee members will be stationed at these goals, and you'll see there's Post-it notes and markers. Go ahead, if you're interested and you don't want to do the QR code, write your name on one of those Post-it notes, name and contact information, and put it up on there. We'll follow up and make sure that you're engaged and involved in that. So again, I just want to extend my thanks to the planning committee, to all of you for being here and taking part of your day, the Community Foundation for the partnership, and for all of the stakeholders that have been a part of this throughout. This really does drive on that stakeholder input, and we'll need to continue to have that input going forward. So I will now pass it to Mary Sellers and Christy Naus to wrap us up. Thanks again.
Well, thank you all for coming today, and special thanks to the leaders who are on our panel Angie, you always do a masterful job weaving the conversation. Thank you for coming together. Thank you for being brave for the cause. You couldn't see it, but there was a lot of love and support floating up behind you in emoji land on the virtual screen. And so just know that this community is behind you in this work as well. We hope that all of you who attended today will take time to download the report, find a place to engage, whether individually or through your business. We need business engagement as well. Thanks to the planning committee, Scott, Jordan, who is hopefully listening online, who facilitated the process. Thank you so much for your leadership. It just couldn't have happened without you. And we know that we are better together, and this plan will need all of us to play a part. So Mary, come on up and we'll send y'all on your way.
I just wanted to add my thanks to everyone in this room, and we're up to 155 online, which I just think is great and speaks volumes of how this community is really interested and knows this is a critical issue that we have to come together on. And I think you heard it throughout the afternoon, and it's something that maybe people might get sick of, but we have to underscore it's not about what we do as an individual organization. You look at advocacy, we've got to come together as systems. We just don't have the capacity to do this. So just appreciate everybody's time. I looked through the attendee list and online, and we've got all the sectors we've been talking about present today. And so for that, I thank you. As Luke said, we'll have planning committee members at each of the goals. If you have a particular interest, please go have a chat with them. And otherwise, thank you again for your time and enjoy your afternoon.